Welcome to Landwards, the podcast for the land-based engineering community, brought to you by the Institution of Agricultural Engineers.
Hello and welcome to Landwards, the podcast of the Institution of Agricultural Engineers. I am your host, editor of Landwards, Andy Newbold, and I'm joined today by Joe Martlew, who is currently research agronomist at NIAB. Good afternoon, Joe.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So let's start from the top. Will you just give us your elevator pitch? Who is Joe Martlew? What does he do? And how did he get here?
So I'm Joe. I work for NIAB at the moment as research agronomist. So we sort of have, there's sort of three bits in my head to NIAB. There's the very clever sort of Cambridge NIAB super academic part. There's our consulting arm that, is out on farm every day working with farmers. And then we sort of sit in the middle where I work, and we try and sort of go between those two things and figure out how to make solutions work from both sides. So it's very sort of applied science. And I get involved with anything. I mean, my background is in soil science, but I get involved with anything from sort of cereals and flea beetle to increasingly potatoes, which is worrying because I don't know a huge amount about growing potatoes.
Well, it sounds like you're about to learn. Just for the uninitiated, whilst NIAB is the name of the business, National Institute of Agricultural Botany?
That's it. Yeah, it's just NIAB now, but it's
NIAB.
A collection of, I think it formed in the early sort of 1900s. NIAB originally was associated with plant breeding and things like that, sort of post-war, progress in agriculture. But we do a huge sort of diverse range of applied research now. And that's our sort of focus, is to support the agricultural industry in applied research, whether that's people coming to us and asking us to sort of do research on their behalf, or us sort of collaborating or leading. We also do a huge amount of sort of knowledge exchange activities as well. So it's a sort of interesting, varied place to work. So
let's go back to the beginning then. We started this. We didn't start the podcast, but I approached you and we started this conversation to say, you are an agricultural engineer, you're a member of the institution, but you may not have seen your route into agricultural engineering as the particularly straightforward or traditional route. So should we just focus on your early education and choices, and maybe whether you had a light bulb moment or a drift towards ag engineering, and just talk us through how you've sort of found yourself to where you are today, Joe?
Yeah, so if it wasn't for I don't know who came up with that definition. I always think of Jane Rickson, the sort of the broad agricultural engineering. If you do anything in agriculture that's manipulating systems and researching, then you are an agricultural engineer. If I'd have never heard anybody say that, I would have never classed myself as an engineer or an agricultural engineer. But I think it's a really good definition because it's a huge sort of broad range of people that make up the membership, which is fantastic. So I'm sort of from a farming background, working on farms, and grandparents were smallholders and that sort of thing, but never sort of farming, owning or anything like that. But I worked in farming, worked on a dairy, did some sort of arboriculture, forestry and that sort of work when I was growing up. It's always sort of land-based stuff. And when I was doing my undergraduate degree at Portsmouth in biology, I got really interested. It's one of those moments, isn't it? I had a tutor that I really got along with and really enjoyed his lectures, and he happened to be a plant scientist, so I wasn't really interested in plant science up until that point, but he got me really, really interested in that. And I ended up, through my link with the dairy farm, on writing my project on staggers in dairy pasture. And so it started to sort of drip feed in that, maybe this interest in plant science would be well spent working in agriculture, because I like doing sort of both those things, being outside, doing practical stuff, and also sort of doing that science bit and that research bit and having that academic part. I then went and joined a an agricultural sort of service, old school sort of merchant on the south coast, and I absolutely hated it. I was stuck in an office putting orders on a phone, looking out at the lovely weather outside, and I was desperate to be outside. So I left and went back to my sort of roots of doing agricultural servicing and arboriculture and forestry. But I always know I wanted to end up back in doing some academic work and some research. And I saw this advert from Harper Adams and AGCO. Mark Moore was one of the supervisors who's an active member of the institute. And I can't remember how they worded it, but it basically said, come out to Zambia, set up a project on looking at controlled traffic farming and precision farming and cultivations. Come and live out here, build the equipment and sort of supervise this project, which as like an early 20-year-old just sounded like the most amazing adventure ever. So I applied and somehow got offered this project and ended up a few months later sort of flying out to Zambia with relatively little sort of agricultural experience in terms of big equipment and arable farming and that sort of stuff. We're just absolutely thrown in at the deep end with minimal staff out there, sort of trying to set up this controlled traffic farming project. And that was really where I first sort of got, really, really interested in sort of ag engineering, from that sort of drip feed at the University of Portsmouth, thinking about plant science. That's when I really started to get interested when I was part of that project at Harbour Adams.
And just going back to jumping on a plane and going to Zambia, did it meet your expectations? Did you know what you were letting yourself in for? What did you just think, this is a great adventure, let's crack on?
Yeah, as you do when you're at that age. I just didn't even think about it. It just sounded like a fantastic adventure. And it's part of the long-term project that they've got at Harper, which a lot of people listening will probably have been aware of at some point. And the idea was to replicate that experiment in Zambia with sort of sub-Saharan African conditions and technology.
So that's the 10-year traffic, and just on the anniversary of the 10-year traffic and tillage.
Exactly, yeah, same project. And so, I had no idea. And I had no idea that, with less technical support and stuff like that out there, I would have to be sort of doing a lot of the field work. I would have to be building the drills with a couple of the technical staff and that sort of thing out there once they've been, shipped in from Namibia and cross deserts and that kind of stuff. So it was just, it was a fantastic adventure. And I certainly didn't know what to expect, but it was, really, really good skills to learn for the rest of my sort of career in terms of project management and managing myself and other people and all that sort of stuff.
Very good habits to get into around personal discipline, aren't they, in structure and organisation.
There was some good fun as well.
Yeah, I can't imagine that for an instant being out there, particularly given the rogues gallery of people you said you were working with as well. So moving on from there.
Yeah, so moving on from there, I came back and I went to work for Agri as an agronomist. Again, really choosing something, I've always wanted to do something that's outside and practical, but also has that kind of base of science. So I was at Agri doing that for about 4 years, based down in the south. So I travelled from sort of London to Wiltshire, down onto the Isle of Wight, which is fantastic. Every 2 weeks, get the ferry over and do some agronomy over there. But I always knew I wanted to sort of get back. I was missing that sort of research element, and I was really lucky. I got to work with Saeed Shah, which some people will know that name. He's a well-known researcher on the south coast and elsewhere. He was working for Agri at the time as the research and development manager in the West. And I got to sort of be around him and the work that he was sort of leading at their West site there. And I thought, I really, really want to be in his position, sort of leading research work and academic work, but still having that sort of strong root in doing the trials work, being out and about, counting stuff, pointing at stuff, and not being sort of locked in an office or a laboratory. And to me, the way that you seem to be able to do that was to go and do a PhD. So that's exactly what I did. I left my nice sort of comfortable job at Agri and moved to Cranfield University on a sort of slim sort of stipend salary, and went and did my PhD in my late 20s. And
I guess going into a research PhD environment isn't necessarily quite the same as bouncing off to university at the age of 18. Full of joy with a desire to look for the bar. It's a much more structured environment, I'm guessing.
Yeah, definitely. And Cranfield's a bit of an exception as well, because it's just a postgraduate university. So it is quite different. It feels quite sort of, much more businessy than, undergraduate days at Portsmouth. But with that, it's got, that has its nice points as well, because it sort of, starts to prepare you a little bit more with a bit more urgency for what you're going to need to do when you start to become a researcher.
It's a community of practice as well, isn't it? So, the focus of the other people who are working and studying around you rubs off, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And all sort of very applied science, whether that's from sort of food storage. They've got obviously a strong soil science department where I was, that comes from that Silso college heritage that sort of ended up at Cranfield. But yeah, through all of their sort of agri-food work, as they term it, it's all sort of really strong applied industry funded research. So it's a really good place to sort of go and learn how that bit of the sort of puzzle works, and it's quite confusing how that works and how funding works.
So moving on, you finished the PhD at Cranfield. What was next?
So I had a short spell back at Agri. I went back to do a research position and work on setting up their soil health offer, but that wasn't a forever position. And I was still looking for that good sort of mixture between academic work, practical work, being outside, working with farmers, but being able to do that sort of high level sort of policy stuff as well. Long list of demands on my part, but I just kept looking until I found it. And fortunately, I saw with my previous link, the PhD was sponsored by NIAB, and I did it at some of their locations and got to know Elizabeth Stockdale, my current boss, through that. And so through that link, I found this position at NIAB. Was hugely lucky to get it when I applied, and that's where I've been for the last sort of 6 months.
No, excellent. So that as I say, taking us through the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 career steps to date, starting with your degree. As I say, it's not what we would call a classic route into agricultural engineering, but that doesn't make it any less valid. It's very valid, and it obviously gives you the broad toolbox you can draw on now, which is what makes you the agricultural engineer you are today. What contributed to your choices? What were your drivers?
Of lack of a defined sort of vision, really. Aside from, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to end up in a job that had practical stuff, that had academic stuff, that allowed me to be outside, but also to sort of start trying to influence, how I thought, agriculture and sort of, my sort of specialist area, how soil management should sort of progress, and being able to influence that. So every time I came up against a barrier where it wasn't quite right, I sort of made the call that I think there is a position out there that encompasses all these things. So I'll keep looking until I sort of find where I wanted to be. It was more sort of like pinball rather than a defined career path.
So I can see you as the careers master at school saying, yes, well, of course, there's the classic route into engineering here, and there's what we'll call the Martlew stroke pinball technique, which, to be honest, for most people in their careers, very few people set out, unless you're going to, fly a jet for BA. Most of us never set out saying, I am going to be, did we? Just I wanted to sort of labour the point a little bit more, if you like, about the link between theory and practice, and just get your take on how vital both of those parts are in terms of, your career and your choices as well.
I think it's hugely important. Yeah, it's the bit that is missing, I think, in a lot of research development and also knowledge exchange, especially in agriculture, is that middle bit. We have, and that's really where NIAB sit, and that's why I wanted to work here. But it's, we've got fantastic academics in universities across the country. I was based in the south for a lot of my career. I now live in North Yorkshire, and there's a whole world of universities up here that I wasn't aware of, and I wasn't aware of how much academic work in agriculture that they do. And some of that stuff is for the best will in the world, is locked away in that kind of academic circle. Just as I've seen on the other side of that, working as an on-farm consultant, is a lot of the information there is generated within that sphere, and it's not shared between. So I think that ability to be able to understand the academic stuff in terms of journal publications and how they communicate information, display information, how that happens on farm, from working on farms and then from advising on farms. Having those two things, being able to drive a tractor, but also being able to understand how, pressure transmission works through different soil types and different compaction, it all sort of sticks together to be that person in the middle who then can collate those things and actually design farming systems that work, rather than, the specialist parts of those sort of three different areas.
I like that. I'm writing that down. Designing farming systems that work. I think that's a great line. And
I'm sorry, easier than it sounds.
Well, I think that's just our 2-second attention span, Joe. That we have to do things at the click of a finger now, don't we? But that point about delivering value. I hate to use the word value; it sounds vulgar and commercial. But delivering value, delivering benefit as the bridge between the theory and the practice and the practical knowledge. I just think that's a really important point not to lose. Let's think about ag engineering. What's agricultural engineering done for you, and how has your career progressed? How's it helped you, if you like to call it that?
Well, I suppose to start with, it gave me somewhere where there was other people. So I got into the institute through, I can't remember what it's called. I think it's the Blime Hill Agricultural Discussion Group in Shropshire. That's based around Harper Adams.
Is it not the Wrekin branch?
Might be, yes, of the institute. But there's a separate agricultural discussion group, and that's where I went first. And I just couldn't believe that there were these people, I was obviously at Harper sort of looking at tyres and control traffic farming and stuff like that. And there were people who would want to meet up on a Thursday evening for 3 hours and look at different tyres and what they'd done to soil. I couldn't believe that there was other people who wanted to do that. So it sort of provided that that area for me to be able to sort of find people with similar interests and connect with other people with similar interests, because the role that I do and the role that lots of us do are so multidisciplinary that I don't think sometimes you sit easily in some sort of, if you work at a university, you sit in an academic institution then, but actually because we're between lots of things, sometimes I think it's hard to figure out what you are. So I think agricultural engineering sort of given me that sort of thing that's behind me, that's okay, that's what I am, that's what I do.
Yeah. Helped you see yourself in a slightly different light.
Yeah, and then provide that network of people who are weird as well and want to do.
Yeah. I'm writing that one down. Network of people who are weird. I'm quite happy with being within a network of people who are weird, I have to say. I think Groucho Marx probably had something to say about clubs, didn't he? Any club who would have me, I wouldn't want to join. So, network of people who are weird, but likewise weird. I'm comfortable with that. How do you use your agricultural engineering in your day job? What does your day job entail?
So I suppose it's that sort of ability to stick stuff together and problem solve is the biggest bit that I have. So I draw on, whether it's a sort of collating some data into a report or designing experiments. Everything I do is sort of about farming systems. So that will always include some element of soil machinery, plants, some sort of inputs and some sort of science literature sort of overlaying that in whatever I'm doing. So it's that ability to understand all of those different parts, how they affect the system, both in terms of sort of like, traditional engineering, but also then sort of thinking about how those things, collate together and come out with a cost to somebody of running a system and that sort of thing. So that's really how I use it in my day job, I think, is all of those different experiences that I've picked up along the way. I'm able to hopefully use those to be able to sort of inform what I'm doing and make it realistic and achievable by somebody.
Just let's look a little bit broader now. So we've got to know a little bit about Joe and Joe's career. Shall we have a chat about, give me your take on the future challenges which ag engineers will have to tackle and maybe a personal perspective on that.
Yeah, so I think that links to what I said previously, that, ag engineers, the way I see ag engineers, and I think the way the Institute sees ag engineers is massively broad. And with the food sector, we have a massively broad set of challenges, whether that is, from focusing right in on soil management, like I often do, right through until environmental land management and the way the policy is trying to sort of view how we're using land and how we're rewarded for land. So I think the future is fantastic for ag engineers, because there's so many challenges, from mechanization and automation to people who are going to be modeling all of these systems and how they work in different soil types, all that stuff that I come up against every day, and the problems and the knowledge gaps that I come up against every day can be solved by people from ag engineering with all of these different backgrounds, whether it's biology like mine is, or a more traditional sort of engineering background, people like Kit Franklin, stuff like that. We all will contribute to sort of solving these challenges. So I think the future is fantastic and broad. Whatever you're interested in, you can pretty much
really exciting,
find something.
We're part of a community of practice with different perspectives and different knowledge and skill sets which contribute together. I mean, it's very easy to watch the news headlines and say, well, the cost of fertilizer is upwards of £1,000 a tonne. There's a shortage of hydrocarbons and oil, and potentially, famine might be stalking the land because of lots of things which are happening in Ukraine. However, that very, very sharp personal challenge also brings about innovation. And great leaps forward in innovation have always come because of society. My view is, as ag engineers, we're servants of society. So we're not solutions going looking for problems. We're looking at problems and trying to take them to bits and say, what can we do to contribute with that? And to me, that's really exciting. And it's very exciting as well that you're there, sort of rubbing your hands together, saying, come on, bring it on. Let's see what we can do here as well. I wanted to just close by asking you, Joe, what would you say to someone who's thinking about a career in ag engineering or land-based work, who maybe hasn't come from a traditional agriculture or agricultural engineering background? Just what would you say to them by way of encouragement?
I would encourage them. It's not, I haven't come from a traditional sort of farm owning, farm work background. It helps to have some practical skills, but that's something that anybody can do. There's plenty of people out there that will pay you or not pay you to come and gain some experience. And I think it should be welcomed by us in the industry that people from outside of our industry want to come in and want to work and want to contribute solutions. I work with some startups, especially from sort of thinking about carbon and that sort of thing at the moment, working with lots of startups with people not from, they're from modeling backgrounds, they're from mathematical backgrounds. They have completely different, they're not tied by the same sort of mental constraints that some of us are that have worked in the industry for a long time. So I think it's fantastic. They should be cracking on and being part of the industry and shaking up all of our mindsets as well as we go along the way.
I mean, I would probably be remiss as we close by asking you what your favourite record is now, if we sort of wrapping up on a desert island dish type. But I equally recognise that is completely unfair, Joe, because I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh, no, it's not. Yeah. Exile on Main Street, Rolling Stones. We never get bored of listening to that.
Okay, Exile on Main Street.
And there's some good engineering. They recorded it in the south of France out of a transit van. So
did they really?
A mobile studio. So there's some good engineering.
I'll see if we can look that one out. I'm not quite sure for copyright reasons whether we can play it or not, but you never know. We have been joined today by Joe Martlew on the Landwards podcast. Joe, thank you very much for your time and for your candour. That has been fascinating, and it's been wonderful to get a handle on, and to just get a sense of your excitement about what's happening in your career and how you can help and how you can take things forward. And I really appreciate your time. So, Joe Martlew, on behalf of myself and the many, many listeners of the Landwards podcast, thank you very much today.
No worries. Thank you.
For more information, visit www.iagri.org. You have been listening to Landwards, the podcast for the land-based engineering community, brought to you by the Institution of Agricultural Engineers.